Hi, welcome back. I'm so glad you guys decided to join us again this week for another story. Hope you enjoy the one I chose for you. First off, though, if you were with us last week, you're going to recognize this picture, and I ask you again, where in the world were Leo and Lily in this photo? Now, if you are one of my River Valley students, you're going to recognize this because I usually have it framed in the library, and it's usually up where Leo and Lily sit. And a lot of you guys have asked a question, where is this and what is it and why is it leaning? Well, if you don't know the answer, I'm going to tell you now. This picture was taken in Pisa, Italy. It is called the Leaning Tower of Pisa. It is a very famous structure in this area, and a lot of people go to visit it every single year. Now, this was originally built as a bell tower. At the very, very top up there, you're going to notice it kind of goes in a little bit. That is the tower, or the bell part. There are 7 bells that have been in this. Each of these bells is a major musical note, and when they're all put together, they make a beautiful sound. Now, because of the tilt and some of the issues they were having, at one point they had to take the bells out because of the weight of them and stuff. This is very famous structure because it is leaning. But when they built it, they didn't go, let's make this structure lean a little bit so more people would come and see it. Nope, that was not their plan. They wanted it to be tall and straight so that people could hear the bells. But because of where they built it, the structure started to lean. Now, it took them quite a while to build this structure. They started in 1173 and ended in 1372. I know, that's a long time. It's 199 years. Why did it take them so long to build this thing? Well, it's because there were some wars going on during that time. So they'd start construction, then they'd have to stop, and then they'd start, and then they'd stop. So it took them 199 years to get this structure completely finished, which on hindsight now, that was a good thing it took them so long because of the soil that they built it on. If they would have done it all really quickly and got it up in just a few years, it would have probably toppled over. They're saying that because it took so long for them to build it, as they built, the soil beneath was able to compact and get a little harder so that it wouldn't fall all the way over, and it's just leaning. Now, in 1993, they decided to go ahead and close it down for a while because they needed to do some major construction on it to see if they could get it stable because it started really leaning. At one point, it was leaning at a 5.5 degree angle, which is quite a bit. So from 1993 to 2001, they had it closed and they were trying to stabilize it, trying to get it, build a different foundation underneath of it to give it some stability. Well, that worked. So now it's only leaning at a 3.97 degree angle. So it's still leaning, but they were able to stabilize it so it's not falling over now. One of the reasons why this is tilting and why it has a tendency to go down a little bit is because it weighs over 14,000 tons. It is solid stone and marble. So that stuff weighs a lot. So with that and the soil underneath of it, it did cause it to lean to one side. So they were able to stabilize it. They noticed that it was leaning at the second story, like I told you before. There are 8 stories in this altogether, and you can walk all the way up to the top. It is, because it is 8 stories high, it is 183 feet tall. On the lower side, it's 183. On the tall side of it is 185. There are 294 steps to get to the very, very top on the short side. On the tall side, there are 296. So as they started building this, they had to compromise a little bit and make it structured. So it's kind of a fun little thing to be on. So, but this is the Leaning Tower of Pisa. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. Now, we have one more week of reading with Mrs. Lowe, and then school's going to be out. So the next photo I'm going to show you is one that's a little closer to home. I believe that my friends here in River Valley should hopefully be able to recognize this, but here's the picture. Where in the world are Lily and Leo in this photo? Join us next week and I will give you the details of where they are. I will tell you though, they're kind of lonely. So think about that this coming week. So I am going to read to you a story today. And this story is a story that I usually read at the end of the school year to my students. And we do a comparison between the book and the movie. And we decide, which one's better? Now, I will tell you that the book came out first. It is Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. I hope you guys like this story. Here we go. Let me get to the right page. Oh my gosh, Mrs. Lowe. All right, here we go. We were all sitting around the big kitchen table. It was Saturday morning, pancake morning. Mom was squeezing oranges for juice, and Henry and I were betting on how many pancakes we could each eat, and Grandpa was doing the flipping. Seconds later, something flew through the air, headed towards the kitchen ceiling. When it landed on Henry. After we realized like the flying object was only a pancake, we all laughed, even Grandpa. Breakfast continued quite uneventfully. All the other pancakes landed in the pan and all of them were eaten, even the one that landed on Henry. That night, touched off by the pancake incident at breakfast, Grandpa told us the best tall tale story he had ever told. Across an ocean, over lots of huge bumpy mountains, across 3 hot deserts and 1 small ocean, there was a tiny town called Chew and Swallow. In most ways, it was very much like any other tiny town. It had a main street lined with stores, houses with trees, and gardens around them, a schoolhouse, about 300 people, and some assorted dogs and cats. But there were no stores in the town of Chew and Swallow. They didn't need anything. The sky supplied all the food that they could possibly want. The only thing really different about Chew and Swallow was the weather. It came 3 times a day at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Everything that everyone ate came from the sky. Whatever the weather served, that's what they ate. But it never rained rain, it never snowed snow, and it never blew just wind. It rained things like soup and juice. It snowed mashed potatoes and green peas, and sometimes the wind blew in storms of hamburgers. The people could watch the weather report on the television in the morning, and they would hear its prediction for the next day's food. When the townspeople went outside, they carried their plates, cups, glasses, forks, spoons, knives, and napkins with them. That way they would be ready and prepared for any kind of weather. If there were leftovers, and there usually were, the people took them to their homes and they put them in the refrigerators in case they got hungry in between meals. The menu varied. By the time they woke up in the morning, breakfast was coming down. After a brief shower of orange juice, low clouds of sunny-side eggs moved in, followed by pieces of toast. Butter and jelly sprinkled down for the toast, and most of the time it rained milk afterwards. For lunch one day, frankfurters already in their rolls blew in from the northwest at about 5 miles an hour. There were mustard clouds nearby. Then the wind shifted to the east and brought in baked beans. A drizzle of soda finished off the meal. Dinner one night consisted of lamb chops, becoming heavy at times with occasional ketchup. Periods of peas and baked potatoes followed by gradual clearing, with a wonderful jello setting in the west. The sanitation department of Chew and Swallow had a rather unusual job for a sanitation department. It had to remove all the leftovers that fell on the houses, the sidewalks, and the lawns. The workers cleaned up after every meal and fed the dogs and the cats. Then they emptied some of it into the surrounding oceans for the fish, turtles, and whales to eat. The rest of the food was put back into the earth so that the soil would become richer for the people's flower gardens. Life for the townspeople was delicious until the weather took a turn for the worse. One day, there was nothing but Gonzola cheese all day long. The next day, there was only broccoli, all overcooked. And the next day, there were Brussels sprouts with peanut butter and mayonnaise. Another day, there was pea soup fog. No one could see where they were going, and they couldn't barely find the rest of their meal that got stuck in the fog. The food was getting larger and larger, and so were the portions. The people were getting frightened. Violent storms blew up frequently. Awful things were happening. One Tuesday, there was a hurricane of bread and rolls all day long and into the night. There were soft rolls and hard rolls, some with seeds and some without. There was white bread and rye and whole wheat toast. Most of it was larger than they had ever seen bread or rolls before. It was a terrible day. Everyone had to stay indoors. Roofs were damaged, and the sanitation department was beside itself. The mess took the workers 4 days to clean up, and the sea was full of floating rolls. To help out, the people piled as much bread as they could into their backyards. The birds picked at it a bit, but it just stayed there and got staler and staler. There was a storm of pancakes one morning with a downpour of maple syrup that nearly flooded the town. A huge pancake covered the school. No one could get it off because of its weight, so they had to close school. Lunch one day brought 15-inch strips of cream cheese and jelly sandwiches. Everyone ate themselves sick, and the day ended with stomach aches. There was an awful salt and pepper wind, accompanied by an even worse tomato tornado. People were sneezing themselves silly and running around to avoid the tomatoes. The town was a mess. There were seeds and pulp everywhere. The sanitation department gave up. The job was just too big. Everyone feared for their lives. They couldn't go outside most of the time. Many houses had been badly damaged by the giant meatballs. Stores were boarded up, and there was no more school for the children. So a decision had to be made to abandon the town of Chew and Swallow. It was a matter of survival. The people glued together giant pieces of stale bread, sandwich style, with peanut butter. Took the absolute necessities with them and sailed on their rafts to a new land. After being afloat for about a week, they finally reached a small coastal town, which welcomed them. The bread had held up surprisingly well enough that they built themselves temporary houses. The children began school again, and the adults all tried to find places for themselves in the new land. The biggest change they had to make was getting used to buying food in the supermarket. They found it odd that the food was kept on shelves, packaged in boxes, cans, and bottles. Meat that had to be cooked was kept in large refrigerators. Nothing came down from the sky except rain and snow. The clouds above their heads were not made of fried eggs, and no one ever got hit by a hamburger again. And nobody dared go back to Chew and Swallow to find out what had happened to it. They were too afraid. Henry and I were awake until the very end of Grandpa's story. I remember his good night kiss. The next morning we woke up to see snow falling outside. We ran downstairs for breakfast and ate it a little faster than usual so we could go sledding with Grandpa. It's funny, but even as we were sledding down the hill, we thought we saw a giant pat of butter at the top, and we could almost smell mashed potatoes. The end. I hope you guys have enjoyed that story. I hope you have an awesome week and that you make good choices and you're kind. And I hope that we will see you back next week to find out where in the world were Leo and Lily in that photo. Bye for now, guys. Bye.